Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Three Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. I am Sam Levy with the CCO, transforming college students to transform the world. And I'm here, of course, as always, with the one and only Byron Borger of Hearts and Minds Books. Hey, Byron, how are you?
I'm doing good, Sam. As usual, it's a nice day today, and we're sitting here at Hearts and Minds Bookstore in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. And it's really, really great to be chatting with folks today.
Yeah, always a pleasure in the midst of the grind to be able to take a pause and sit down here and chat books and hear about some new or old books that you're recommending. I always look forward to these conversations, and I hope our listeners do as well, getting to listen in on our conversation.
Are you reading anything right now? This is a pop quiz here. What's on your bedstand right this minute?
Yeah, I just finished a really interesting the second book in a series by Becky Chambers. The series is called The Monk and Robot. The first one was called A Psalm for the Wild Bill, kind of a novella, pretty short, really quick read. The second one was A Prayer for the Crown Shy. Really interesting story, kind of sci-fi, but not really, but really some really interesting themes, and it's really kind of shaping my imagination right now. I've really enjoyed it.
With those titles, it sure sounds kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, it sort of is, but it's hard to describe. And in the plot, it doesn't feel like sci-fi. It feels like I don't know. It's this really simple, fun story, and yet with a lot of depth in the questions that it raises.
Cool.
Yeah. What about you?
I've been reading bits and pieces for months, a book called, I think it's called The Top 100. And it looks at the top 100 Billboard chart hits from the day they started doing the Billboard charts the way they do. And
Sure.
So that would have been the 60s, but not into the 50s with Elvis and stuff. And it looks at particularly one that made some sort of significant difference in the way the charts worked, in the way a new genre was hit, country or rap or whatever, and the backstories of those artists and how those songs were produced and who played on them. It's just, if you're seriously into pop music, this critic, he has a blog about it too, but this book is spectacular. So I've been dipping into that, and I'm up to almost to the end, and he's in the 21st century and talking a lot about hip hop stuff and cross-cultural stuff within artists, electronic stuff and so forth. So I'm really enjoying that. And I'm in the middle of a memoir by a guy named Peyton Dodd. And it's a memoir about his father and the very harsh kind of alcoholic background he had with his dad. And he was intending to write a book about father figures, people that kind of took the place of his own father, and why we think about the dads that we have. So, and then about him being a dad. So it's sort of a memoir about his own dad, about the dad figures in his life, and about the dad he became. It is a very moving memoir. So I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle of that too.
Oh, that's great. So what do we got
today? Talk about reading books. As always, I got 3 books, and the theme is something around, I guess we could call it learning or reading, and how books can help us learn, although not just books. And so the very first one uses as its title a biblical phrase that people that know the scriptures may know this phrase. It's called a teachable spirit. A Teachable Spirit. It's by A.J. Swoboda. Swoboda is a hero of mine. He has a book on doubt. He has a book on Sabbath that's spectacular, Subversive Sabbath. He has a book on ecological care. So he writes on a variety of topics. He has a book on hard times, particularly during Lent. He has sort of a book about the 3 days of Holy Week. So yeah, he writes about a lot of different things. He's a Pentecostal Bible teacher and a really thoughtful writer and a good writer. This Teachable Spirit, the subtitle says it all. It's called The Virtue of Learning from Strangers, Enemies, and Absolutely Anyone. And he makes the case here that we are called in the New Testament to have a teachable spirit. We're not supposed to be prideful and think we have it all together. We're not supposed to think we know it all. In fact, we don't know it all. And the sooner we realize that, you talk to really learned people, and they say the more you learn about something, scientists and stuff, they say the more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know. And so the kind of amateurs that think they know everything obviously aren't very deep people. And when you get to a certain level of insight, you kind of realize, oh my goodness, there's so much to learn. I really am just a beginner. And so I really have a lot to learn. It's certainly that way in the Christian faith, that certain kind of people think they have all the answers and all their theological answers answered and everything pigeonholed precisely. And you realize that is a house of cards. It comes undone pretty quickly when something happens. So even the most mature Christians know the mysteries of faith that we just don't know at all. So he's arguing that we need to have a teachable spirit, which starts with this notion of humility. He also then talks about something that we hear at Hearts and Minds and the Jubilee Conference that we often talk about here in this podcast. The CCO has always been a distinctive campus ministry that nurtures students into the life of the mind, but not for the sake of being intellectuals necessarily, but being thoughtful so we can promote God's vision for human flourishing. So we have to think hard about our lives, about our times, about our culture, about our world, and our academic careers as students, thinking Christianly and double study, we sometimes call it, where you read Christian books in your topic, whatever you're studying, theater arts or literary criticism or astrophysics or computer science. What do the scriptures say and what do Christian theological books say about science or healthcare or technology or business or education or philosophy? So this double study notion of using your mind is something that CCO has often talked about. And in a way, those that have heard our own origin story at Hearts and Minds knows that we created a bookstore that tries to offer thoughtful resources for people in the workaday world, business, science, art, technology. Well, I haven't featured any books on developing the Christian mind and how to think well Christianly in a long, long time. We model that by offering a variety of books, but I haven't really tackled that exact topic in a while. And I thought, this teachable spirit begins to do that because it makes the case for the Christian mind. But here's what's unique about this. Unlike a dozen other books on the Christian mind, James Sire and others that talk about having the mind of Christ and thinking Christianly, the way this one gets at that is it says we need to be teachable and learn how to learn from various sorts of people and environments. So here's the chapter titles. Get this. The first is learning how to learn, what it means to have the Christian mind and to be humble and open. And then he says we have to learn from experts. There are people that know more than we do, and we have to submit ourselves to those. That's probably the teachable spirit phrase in the New Testament is probably something about that the elders in the churches that were messed up, that Paul was writing letters to, was inviting them to learn the things of the gospel, the first things of discipleship that they need to know, because the Christian faith was so new in those days, and the apostles had something to teach people. So you have to learn from experts in any given field. We do, by the way, have sort of a disdain of expertise these days. Everybody thinks they know everything because we can Google stuff. And so everybody thinks they're an expert, and you don't really need real experts. That's really unfortunate. So he looks at the power of those who have spent their life studying something and why we need to honor that. The next one is learning from strangers. That's a fascinating chapter. The next one is learning from the dead. C.S. Lewis's famous line about reading old books. It's kind of that sort of thing, that there are people that have gone before us that have ancient wisdom that may not seem fresh to the 21st century, but frankly may have more wisdom to it than we would recognize. So learning from the dead. There's a chapter on learning from children. What a fascinating chapter. And there's a page or two in there I didn't like, to be honest, but we can skip that. There's some stuff about learning from children and the childlike joy of learning that kids can have before it's squashed out of them by the school system. Learning from secular culture. We who talk about common grace and the CCO often talk about this, that even the worst of secular culture might have something for us to learn, that even a broken clock strikes correctly every so often. So we can learn from pagan culture. Geesh, the Bible was full of that kind of stuff. And then he says we can even learn from our enemies. So this is a way to kind of learn from common grace through experts, through others, through strangers, through children. I adore this book, and I think it's a great way into this conversation of having a Christian mind without overly emphasizing the academic piece of being a Christian, thoughtful scholar in the classroom of the university. It has a little of that, but just more for ordinary people, what it means to learn from kids, to learn from strangers, to learn from popular culture, from movies, from creation itself, as it speaks volumes to us in the very glories of the way the creation works. So there you go. A Teachable Spirit, A.J. Swoboda. Learn how to learn from unexpected places, if you will. That sounds like a great book, doesn't it?
It really does. So much there. Any book that we're reading, we're learning, we're absorbing things, but this kind of dives into the value of that in a more intentional way, I guess. So,
And
so
it's
certainly
very
sounds well
nicely
worth
written.
the read.
It's really a nicely read book. It's a nicely written book. Have you ever like dove into a topic, Sam, where you've just said, I want to learn about this or learn about that, and I'm going to start reading a couple of books or consult with some experts, do a couple podcasts, whatever your method is, but you say you
Yeah.
want to learn something?
Yeah, absolutely. Chase down sometimes weird, random seeming interests all the time that I get excited about and want to learn everything I can about.
You going to name one?
Oh man, it's that funny thing where there's so many examples, and then when I'm on the spot, I can't.
Yeah.
I
Well, I'll name one for you. I
Yeah,
mean, maybe
please.
you've always liked to cook. Maybe you've always liked to read about food and theology, but I know you adore that book, Supper of the Lamb, right? Which is
That's right.
Capon's Theology of Food and an actual recipe for a big old meal, which I think you've probably actually attempted to cook, right?
Parts of it, not the entire thing yet,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's certainly that's been kind of an ongoing interest of mine for several years now, but that's shaped a lot of the books I read, what I watch on TV, cooking shows, things like that.
Yeah. There you go. Learning
For
from
sure.
experts and learning from strangers and learning from experiences. That's exactly what this Swoboda book is about. It inspires us to enter this joy of learning. But it also, I mean, he's not preachy, he's not nasty, he's not a legalist, but he does have a compelling argument that this is something we should be about, that this is part of our discipleship, having a teachable spirit. It's a command. And so having an earnest, open heart to want to learn stuff is not just something that neat people can do and it can be fun, or that we have to keep up with the world, like in some vague way. It's a biblical command to love God with all your mind and to have a teachable spirit and to honor God in the things we learn and to be a flourishing person that grows and lives into a full life. He makes a case that this is what we should be about, and that we are failing our Lord if we don't keep our minds fit and always learning new things. I'll tell you one thing, just this is sort of an odd little thing, but this theory of different generations, and whether that's even true or not, that there were these different kind of Gen X and Gen Z and boomers and builders, they make a strong case for that. Some of the books that have argued for the way you come of age and what's happening in your life at a certain era shapes how you see life. There's a lot of compelling truth to that. Although other people would push back and say, nope, they're just crass generalizations and it's shallow. So that debate about generational theory, and then if you buy into that generational theory, what kind of generations are in a church, and should we be intergenerational or not? Do intergenerational learning experiences actually work or not? What's the data on that? And so I've done some reading on intergenerational stuff. And it's one of these things that I like the theory, I like reading about it, but I'm not sure it always works when we try it in our own church. So this kind of learning curve of leaning into the question of different generations and how different generations think, that's just a topic some people might want to explore and read 5 or 6 books on the topic and become a little better acquainted with how different generations engage each other in the workplace or in the ball field or even in the congregation.
Yeah. That's great. And it sounds like sometimes we think about learning, we think about that from a kind of an academic, intellectual standpoint, and not everybody is wired that way. But it sounds like this is something for all of us. All of us are called to this. All of us are learners, whether or not that's kind of an academic pursuit or whether that's just kind of in the course of your life, things that you're pursuing and diving into.
Well put. Yep. Well, that leads then to the second book. And again, it's the same sort of situation where it seems to me that there are books on this topic of reading well that tend to be pretty academic, that are for scholars that read books kind of professionally. And I like a number of them. I have discovered, it's a brand new book. It just came out. It's not even technically out yet, but we've got our shipment. And it is called World of Wonders. World of Wonders by a good friend named Jeff Crosby. World of Wonders that is a spirituality of reading. And I want to make the case that this is a book for everyone. If you're listening to this podcast, 3 Books from Hearts and Minds, or you've got some connection to the CCO, the campus ministry that Sam works for, then you obviously already know that books are part of the tools we use to grow in our discipleship, and that we use books in ministry, and we give books out to students, and we use books in book clubs and Bible study groups and so forth. So you're already a true believer. But there are people that don't really read much, and then they pick up a book and they're bored by it, or they try to read a C.S. Lewis book and it's too dry. And then they give up and they say, that's not for me. This is a book that I think anybody could enjoy, whether you're a book lover and a bibliophile, whether you're a bookstore owner and a aficionado of the reading life, or whether that's something that is not that appealing to you. I am begging you, get a couple of these books and give them out to people. It is one of the best books of the year that I thoroughly enjoyed because it invited people into a richer reading life, using books as tools for growth, for learning, for discipleship, for spirituality, and why Christians should care about all that in a way that is utterly winsome, not shaming at all, inviting people to start where they are and move deeper into the reading life. He has bibliographies at the end of each chapter that include some heavy books and some lighthearted books, some serious books and some less serious books, so that even the reading lists of things he recommends shows his generous taste and his meeting people where they're at kind of spirit. So I really like this book. Jeff Crosby, the first couple chapters are called Laying the Foundations. Why should you even read it all? Is reading a spiritual discipline, as I like to say? And he looks at stories and practices and pathways to understand books as tools for your own spiritual growth. And then he has a chapter called Reading Scripture as a Spiritual Discipline. Again, stories, practices, and pathways for ways to read the Bible better, because frankly, when we're learning to read and appreciate stories, part of that is to get into the narrative of the Bible itself. So those are the first 3 chapters, part 1 that he calls Laying the Foundations. At the end of each chapter, he has a little page interview that he yields to somebody else, kind of an expert in the subject, and they have a little piece in it too. So these are authors. In one case, it's Bob Freiling, who's made Bible studies at InterVarsity Press for decades and decades and is a legendary figure in the Christian publishing world. And Bob Freiling has a little chapter in here. By the way, Jeff used to be the head of InterVarsity Press. He's now, having left InterVarsity Press, the head of the ECPA, which is the Evangelical Christian Publishing Association. So it's a trade association of publishers and bookstores and booksellers, writers and publishers who are widely under the banner of evangelical faith. There are Catholic publishers and stuff that are in it too, I think. But the ECPA, they do the Gold Medallion Awards every year. They do some fiction awards every year. In fact, he's hosting an announcement of short list for the next award-winning books. I think even today, as we're speaking, he's probably at that awards show or that PR event announcing some good Christian novels. So Jeff is deeply engaged in the publishing world. He came to Christian faith through a mom and pop Christian bookstore when he was in college. He bought some music, actually, and he listened to a record, Keith Green or somebody, and led him to deeper faith. And then he got reading books. And his girlfriend was the daughter of the bookstore owners. And he eventually ended up coming to faith and working in that bookstore. So he's worked in retail, he's worked in wholesale, he's worked in the publishing world, and now he's in the trade association world. So he's done just about everything you can do in the book world, from being a lowly clerk in a bookstore to being the head of a publisher to being the head of the trade association. So if anybody on the planet knows about reading, it's Jeff Crosby. Well, the part in the beginning that I mentioned was laying the foundations. The second part is called The Wide, Wide, Wonderful World of Reading. And he talks about the power of story and reading fiction. He talks about the paying attention to things, and he talks about reading poetry, as Lucy Shaw as the contributor in there. He says a great chapter on reading diverse voices, why we need to read people unlike ourselves, particularly around cultural questions, multi-ethnic authors, Black authors, and so forth. He has an African-American writer chiming in at the end of that chapter. And then he says a whole bit that I really like, a chapter on reflection by reading memoirs, people who tell their life story. And so those are 4 different sort of genres: fiction, poetry, diverse writings, and memoir that he talks about in the second part, in the wonderful world of reading. And then the third part is reading through seasons of faith and life, that in different seasons of your life, you need different kind of books, and in different seasons of your own spiritual journey, we need different sorts of books. We read in different seasons in our family life. We can read for grief and loss. We can read in seasons of doubt and fear. And we can read during the seasons of the liturgical year. So in this last part, he gives you different options to read in different times and seasons of your life or of your church year. It is a splendid, fun book. I really, really like it. And I want to invite listeners now, if they're following along in our podcast here, to know that we're going to do a Zoom free conversation with the author, an hour long. You can ask questions of him. I'll host the conversation with Jeff Crosby on October 10th. I think it's a Monday night, October 10th. It'll be, I think, at 8 o'clock Eastern time. He's in the Midwest, so 7 o'clock if you're in the Midwest listening. So it'll be an evening hour or so with Jeff. Paraclete Press is helping put that together, who published this. And we are thrilled to be able to have an hour to chat with Jeff about the theology and spirituality of reading in his book, World of Wonders, that we can open up a whole world of wonders through the printed page. And God's glory just unfurls that much more richly when you have the important discipline of the reading life. So that's a book I'm thrilled about. It's one of my favorite books of the year. Fair warning to anybody that cares about these sorts of things. I'm described in this book, and Hearts and Minds is quoted a time or two. He likes our bookstore. He's been in our bookstore. And so Jeff is kind enough to mention us, and a couple of other really cool bookstores, like the Eighth Day Bookstore out in Wichita. He interviews the great owner of that store as well. So Jeff is a fan of bookstores. He describes a couple different ones. I think maybe the Logo store in Dallas and made its way in here as well. So it's a fun kind of thing that we feel close to. I have a blurb in the back, which is kind of fun. So there you go. The Spirituality of Reading, A World of Wonders by Jeff Crosby. A perfect book for this 3 books of Hearts and Minds about learning.
Love that. Not the first time that Byron Borger's been mentioned in a book, and won't be the last, but that's always fun. And yeah, we'll make sure to include the information about that conversation. That sounds like a really fun thing to tune into for our listeners.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. He's a good communicator. He's a fun storyteller. He's working right now, word to the PR here, I don't even know if it's public, but he's working on a book that'll be like this. Instead of books, it'll be about music. And he's a baby boomer like me. We were talking about generations. You know, he came of age, a little younger than me, but he came of age in the 70s, listening to Joni Mitchell and Paul Simon and Van Morrison and cool people like that. He knows singer-songwriters like Brooks Williams, who's a friend of ours. So he has different chapters on different artists and what we can learn about the spirituality of our leaning into his evangelical worldview by listening to these seemingly secular artists. So that's going to be a fun book. That's going to come out a year from now in a different publisher. But so Jeff's a great guy. He's wrote a book on spirituality. He was one of the guys that guided some of the literature of Steve Garber when Garber was publishing on InterVarsity Press. You know, Steve's a good friend that used to work for the CCO and has 3 great books on InterVarsity Press. And Jeff shepherded some of those books. So he's a good, well thought out reader and writer himself, and we're thrilled to have him. And he does mention Hearts and Minds pretty nicely in this. So, you know, I get mentioned every now in a book in passing, but this is about bookstores, so it's about us, and we're really honored to make our way into this world of wonder. That is, by the way, World of Wonder, an album by Bruce Cockburn, singer-songwriter Bruce Cockburn.
Yeah, there you go.
And I am sure that is no accident for Jeff. Can I tell you about one more in our time remaining?
Please do.
One of the things that in World of Wonders he recommends, and Swoboda does as well in his book about a teachable spirit, is to listen to others, even strangers, even people unlike ourselves. And so I picked a woman who is a Black woman writer, and there are probably Black women listening to this, so she is not that different than you. But for many of us that are white folks, this may be a bit of a stretch. It is the memoir of a woman who is renowned for her love of books. Her name is Edim, Glory Edim. And Glory founded a decade ago, maybe, a very, very world-class popular blog. I mean, a really big name called The Well-Read Black Girl. She started this online book club helping Black girls and women discover writers mostly in their own Black Afrocentric tradition. Her favorite writers, Gwendolyn Brooks and, June Jordan and Toni Morrison and Nikki Giovanni. I mean, she knows these Black women writers well. Bell Hooks. She knows a lot of Black women writers. And then she expands that a bit and had this blog highlighting a book club, kind of like an Oprah book club for Black girls. And that book became published. It is literally called The Well-Read Black Girl. And that is called Finding Our Stories, Discovering Ourselves. That came out a couple of years back. And then she wrote another one. She edited a book called On Girlhood, which were short stories from the Black girl library, so to speak, from books that she's talked about in the book club. She took short stories and put them all together, all about stories of girls coming of age. That should have been a hint that she's interested in how African-American girls come of age in America, because those on girlhood stories essentially is what this now story is, her coming of age, her growing up as a Black girl raised in Washington, D.C. by Nigerian parents. Her parents were Nigerian refugees or immigrants, I should say, in a certain sense, fleeing the horrible, horrible civil war in Nigeria in the late 60s. We called it Biafra in those days, the Biafran starvation and the Biafran war between tribes in Biafra, what became that part of Nigeria. And they both came. Her father got a degree from Howard. Her mother was studying to be a teacher in Nigeria and did a semester abroad in the United States and met her soon-to-be husband there. And they got married and immigrated to the United States, and Glory was born. The first chapter is about the food that her mother cooks, the Nigerian recipes, and the way her mother, strict, because Nigerian women are pretty strict with their daughters, the way she expressed love was by cooking spices, and she's talking about the food and the recipes and the smells in the kitchen. And when they would go to these Nigerian parties with other Nigerian immigrants and the food that they would each bring to these potlucks, it reminded me a little bit of Jeff Chew's marvelous memoir called Good Soil, where he talked about his parents showing love by cooking Chinese food in that case. And Jeff Chew's memoir about Chinese family food came to mind as I was reading the first chapter of this, which is about Nigerian food being cooked in Washington, D.C. The first chapter is about how her on-again, off-again boyfriend gave her a T-shirt that said, "Black girls read." And it all of a sudden became like a point when she wore that T-shirt that people would ask her, "Oh, what do you like to read? What do you mean by that? What do Black girls read certain kind of books?" In New York, she was lonely and a little sad, and she would start wearing this T-shirt. And all of a sudden, she got all kind of friends talking about Black literature. And that's when she started the blog that became world famous. She's won all kind of awards now for this blog and this book club, online book club. And this is her life story. Gather Me, it's called, a memoir in praise of the books that saved me. So it is a memoir about her growing up and about her love of books and how certain kind of literature, as she puts it, saved her. The very first after the first chapter on food, the second chapter is the first book she read as a child, and it's her child's story Bible. And the narratives of the stories in the scriptures is the second chapter. I was sort of surprised to read that. It was wonderful. And then how she had to start reading it to her younger sibling. Her parents were going through some serious difficulties, and she sort of came of age a bit early in the midst of that trauma and started reading these Bible stories to her younger sibling. She loves books. Books saved her in that certain sense. There's lots of writers in this book, particularly Black women writers, but other writers as well. And anybody that loves the printed page, or anybody that likes memoirs, or anybody that likes global stories of immigrants coming to the United States, or what it means to be a minority in the United States, and what it means to have solace by finding authors that give voice to your own deepest experiences. What a book this is. Gather Me by Gloria Edim. It's a great book about learning, a great book about books, a great book about reading, and it's a great supplement to the very things Jeff tells us about in World of Wonders, which theologically Swoboda tells us about in the Teachable Spirit. So 3 great books on reading, on books, on learning, on expanding our own sense of things. And it's the kind of stuff we at Hearts and Minds get really excited about. So thanks for letting me go on and on about them. I appreciate it, Sam. I hope this is helpful for folks. And I think they're the kind of books that you yourself would probably love a lot.
Absolutely. Lots to learn. There's always so much to learn. So many great books out there. And these are 3 of them. So thank you all for listening and tuning in. If you would like to order one of these books, the link is in the episode description near the beginning. Please like and share on social media, share by word of mouth this podcast, tell your friends about us, and reach out. We'd love to hear from you about what you're reading, what you're learning about and want to learn about, and Byron would have some even more personalized book recommendations if there's particular topics that you want to dive into. So for Byron, Hearts and Minds Books, and the CCO, this has been another episode of the 3 Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. Thanks, friends.